It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Paxton Quigley. Hi, Paxton. How are you?
I'm really good, and how are you today?
Doing great, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
So you've got a book out called Armed and Female 2, and when did Armed and Female 1 come out?
Oh, a while ago. It was almost 20 years ago. I was in the forefront 20 years ago supporting women getting guns for self-defense. But, you know, things have changed over the years, and I decided it was time to totally update the book, and I'm so happy I've done that. Now I have lots of photographs and more recommendations about guns for women, as well as even, non-lethal weapons, as well as traveling, because so many women are traveling these days. And, things have drastically changed. First of all, change in terms of how many women own guns now. There's no real exact figure, but they're talking about 35 million women who buy guns for self-defense. I don't know. In some cases, it's the husband or the father or a boyfriend that's buying the guns. And interestingly enough, black women are the fastest growing group of gun owners, and so are Asian women. So there's become, a big difference. And I think a lot has to do just with the changing landscape. 46% of women live alone now. That's a high amount. And many of them live with children and need to protect their children. And many of them work the night shift. And unfortunately, there are many, I shouldn't say many, but some women who have bad relationships and are fearful.
I was just going to say, when the first book came out, it looks like was a major hit, and you went on a giant media tour, it seems. Yeah, well,
yeah, it was. Boy, was it wonderful. Hey, I ended up teaching in Japan, in France. Yeah, I had a real go at it for a couple of years, and then of course it died down. It's different now. Unfortunately, I did have a this is really kind of strange. I had someone representing me to sell the book, and unfortunately, all of a sudden I didn't hear from him, and I went online, and it turned out he died. Oh. And it's not easy to get an agent these days, especially if you're pro-gun, because a lot of the agents, unfortunately, don't like guns or, have a so-called liberal tendency, which they shouldn't, but that's the way it goes. So I decided, to publish it with Amazon, and I am getting sales, so I feel good, and I've been going on a lot of different shows. And hopefully, more and more women will learn that if you're going to buy a gun, you just can't go ahead and buy a gun and feel that you're safe, because you've got to really take lessons, and it's not just a question of one lesson, but a couple of lessons, and then after that, and in the beginning, going out and practicing it at least once a month.
What do you tell those people that are anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment?
Well, I got to tell you, it's hard to have an argument with them because some of them are so steadfast, that they'll say, I hate guns. Guns are bad. And I try and talk about the fact that there are women, and I'm, particularly talking about women who are in situations where, they really need a gun, and they don't want to listen to that. So once you're talking with an anti-gun person, it's very hard to change them, except if something happens to them or someone they know. And all of a sudden, I get calls. Oh, Paxton, they'll tell me their story, and can you teach me how to shoot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, unfortunately, a lot of times it takes women to buy a gun when it's too late to buy a gun.
That's a good point. I've heard that many times, where people who were very anti-gun all of a sudden became pro-gun as soon as they had an incident where they needed one.
Yes. And, it's unfortunate that they have to wait till that point, because in many cases people get injured, if not killed, or raped. Women get raped.
That's true. So when you were, before you did the book, I'm just looking at your bio here. I just want to do a little bit of a backstory, just so people kind of know who you are. It says that you worked at the Playboy Enterprises, Director of Community Relations, when was that?
Yes. Oh, that was back in early 80s, and I reported directly to Christy Hefner. It was the most wonderful job one could have, let me tell you. I remember calling up my mother and said, Mom, I've got a job made in heaven. I worked in the Playboy building, interfaced with Hugh Hefner, who happens to be, he died unfortunately a couple of years ago, a very smart man, a nice man. He, never felt that he was really exploiting women. Put out a wonderful magazine, and the company itself, gave a lot of money to various different organizations, including, for example, National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws. So I was involved with the whole community aspect, did a lot of big fundraisers, did what was needed to be done in terms of publicity. If there was bad publicity, I had to try and make it into, no, it's not bad publicity, but what we're doing is good. So I did that for 5 years, and unfortunately, what happened in that situation is there were a lot of other, shall we say, so-called girly magazines that were coming out. So that dipped into their profit. And then the really big thing that happened is when Playboy was banned from the newsstands. And that really took a hit because a lot of people would buy Playboy on the newsstands. So things began to go downhill. And it was basically the time to shut down a lot of the events that were, happening and, giving money away because of competition. That's basically what happened.
Also says that you were briefly a bodyguard for Yoko Ono. When was that?
Oh, that was in the 90s. I was a bodyguard for Yoko and her then young son, Sean.
Right.
Yeah, and she was terrific to work with. It was very easy to work with it. Well, actually, a lot of the clients who I had, and some of them who I can't mention, who I would tell them beforehand, you're going to be going into a safe place, which perhaps could become unsafe. And when I tell you that it's time to leave, you have to leave. And I did carry a gun. Fortunately, I never had to use it. It was a very interesting experience for me because when I wrote the book, I really had to learn about all aspects of what it means to have protection. And I took a number of protection courses, and fortunately, I didn't have to pay. So, shall we say, it was a really fun experience. And when I would tell friends what I learned to do, they were shocked that things like that happened. So, I really, enjoyed the experience, and I enjoyed teaching the women how to shoot. I really didn't have any problems on the range. I always taught basically at an outdoor range. I had, guys on the line, knew what to do, and everything was done very carefully. And I taught both a beginner's class as well as an intermediate class, but I didn't go on to a more advanced class, which would include bodyguard work and stuff like that. That was enough for me. But I ended up teaching 7,000 women how to shoot.
Wow!
And it was quite an interesting experience because there were women from all walks of life, and before the class part where you'd learn how to shoot, I would ask the women, each one of them, because I wanted to know who was in the class, I said, why are you here? And there were all sorts of reasons. In many cases, because women had been raped. Some of them were in bad situations. Some of them were just fearful because of where they lived and the kind of work they did. And some of them, which was quite nice to hear, that they said, I want to know how to shoot a gun.
Well, I think it's a good idea that everybody knows how to shoot it, and hopefully never has to. But
correct.
Yeah.
I agree, yes.
Did something happen with you that caused you to get involved with this?
Well, I had a problem with one person bothering me, and I didn't really know what to do, and I asked around, and people said, you may want to get a gun. And I said, well, I really don't want to have a gun. Well, they said, there's not really, much you can do. You can take karate and all that, but in the end, the best thing, and I certainly agree with what they had said, is to have a gun and know how to use it and when to use it. And all of that's, I go through it in my book. It's quite thorough. I've got, lots of pictures of different kind of guns, what guns I think that are best for women, and that includes both revolvers and semi-automatics. Then I have a chapter on non-lethal options for self-defense. I have a chapter on security while traveling. So I have to tell you that I think it's an all-inclusive book, and of course there's one on unarmed self-defense also. So I think I've covered all of the questions that someone may have about how to protect themselves, including how to conceal a weapon. A lot of people don't even think about concealing a weapon in their home, or if you're going to be carrying. There are lots of purses now on the market where women can carry a gun, and how to pull it out and when to use it. So I have to tell you, I highly recommend the book to women because there's just so many situations out there that occur now that never occurred, let's say, 10, 20 years ago. Our streets, unfortunately, are not as safe as they used to be.
Well, I would agree with that. In the United States, there is such a wide gamut of laws regarding concealed carry. In some states, you need no permit, you need nothing, you can just do it. I think they call it constitutional carry. And in other places, like you said, you lived in New York City, I understand it's very difficult to get a concealed weapons permit. Is that true?
Yes, but you know what people do? I will tell you what they do is they go to a state where you can purchase a gun without getting a permit. And obviously, and I'm not telling people to do this, and then we'll bring it back into New York City.
Well, yeah, I would.
Or New York State.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're literally, first of all, there's supposedly 265 million people who own guns in the United States. People are getting, they get a gift of a gun. There are all sorts of ways of getting a gun. And, of course, there's, the real illegal market, which, of course, I don't recommend. And, I don't recommend that people go to another state and buy a gun and then bring it, back into a state where you can't have a gun or can't carry a gun. It's so people are doing it. And, the police can't go house to house to find out if you have a gun or where your gun is located in the house.
If you were to have to use your gun in New York City and you had done that, you'd brought it in from another state, how would that weigh in terms of your, how do I want to say it, if you had to go to court, let's say somebody tried to assault you and you shot them and you killed them, would the fact that the gun was illegally concealed in New York City weigh in on...
I really can't answer that question. I don't know, and it's a good question, and no one has really ever, told me about that or discussed that with me. It's a very good question that you're asking. I think the only thing I could say is you better get a very good lawyer. Who knows the laws and knows how to get around the laws.
Well, you see these stories of, and even not even like out on the street, but people are at home in some states, and somebody breaks in and tries to rob them, and they assault them. The homeowner shoots them, and the homeowner ends up getting arrested.
Right. Well, and again, that becomes, some people have said, and it's totally ridiculous, if you shoot them outside your home, drag them in the house.
I've heard that.
That's illegal. Again, the circumstances and, the city you're in depends. I think it's much easier for a woman to get off rather than a man.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think so.
Yeah. And as I said, I go into all of these details. So it's almost, someone said, even though it's not a lengthy book, it's like an encyclopedia in terms of what you can learn with lots of pictures. And I have pictures of women shooting on the range, and it's I really had a really good time redoing the book. And I also, have a great index. I have a list of the most prominent practical shooting schools, and a lot of them are female-only gun shooting ranges. So that's good. And there are also National African American Gun Association. It teaches African Americans how to shoot. There's a group called the Pink Pistols. That is dedicated to the gay population. There's a Latin Rifle Association out there. There's an Asian Pacific American Gun Owners Association. There's a Jewish gun club called Bullets and Bagels. And then there's Armed Women of America. And I could go on. And of course, one of the best known one, or I shouldn't say it's the best because a lot of these others are very good, the NRA.
Right.
I highly recommend taking a course from the NRA, and over the years, all of these, the NRA has now has more female instructors. Before it was all male, and now they're more female instructors, which I think is important for some women to be taught by a woman rather than a man, because they're different shall we say decisions that need to be made, et cetera, et cetera. So all of this is in my book, and it can be bought on Amazon. It's available in paperback. Doesn't cost too much money. It's also in Kindle, and a lot of people, fortunately, are interested in the subject.
Okay. We do have to kind of wind this down. Thanks so much for coming on. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Yeah, it's PaxtonQuigley.com.
Okay, and there's information there and links to where people can buy the book?
Yes, and you can go straight away to Amazon and get the book also. And I've got lots of different information out there.
Okay, great. Are you still teaching or no?
No, for the time I've stopped teaching. I think about it, and I've taken people out on an individual basis, but to teach a big class, and I think I hate to say it, but I think that it's harder to teach people today than it was 10, 15 years ago.
You think there's more anti-gun stigma these days?
Yeah, and of course I live in New York, so there's a big anti-gun. Although it's interesting, I find a lot of people that will kind of like say, "Well, got to tell you, I do own a gun. I'm anti-gun, but I do own a gun." I've heard a lot of that.
No, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was nice talking to you. Best of luck with the new new and improved Armed and Female 2, never an easy target. Hope it does well.
Thank you very much. It was terrific talking with you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye now.